Your presenter today will be Anne Parnell. She is our numeracy trainer here at SIMA. That's all for me now, so I will give the floor to Anne, who will commence her presentation. I hope you enjoy. Thank you. Anne, all yours.
Thanks, Sophie. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the QuickSmart Numeracy Information Webinar for 2016. As Sophie just said, my name is Anne Parnell. I'm a research fellow here at the SIMA National Research Centre, and a large part of my role is working with teachers and instructors who are working with the QuickSmart program. I'll be leading the webinar today and taking you through some of the important aspects of the QuickSmart program. So the QuickSmart Numeracy and Literacy programs were developed by Professor John Pegg and Professor Lorraine Graham from the SIMA National Research Centre. We sit within the School of Education at the University of New England, and there are now some 1,200 QuickSmart schools across Australia. The SIMA vision addresses three key stakeholders in education, so the children, their parents and their teachers. And SIMA's research always begins in a regional setting, regional and rural setting, but programs like QuickSmart have now been trialled and found to be very successful in the urban setting as well. Okay, so during this webinar, we're going to look at the following. So why do we need a program such as QuickSmart in an education setting such as ours? What are the general aims of the QuickSmart program? What are the components of a QuickSmart numeracy lesson? How do we set up the QuickSmart program, or how do you set up the QuickSmart program within your school? How would you select the appropriate students for the QuickSmart program? We're going to look at some data collection and from that some national QuickSmart results. And lastly, we're going to look at how to make your school a successful QuickSmart school. Now, please be mindful that we're just going to touch on each of these things today, and these will be spelt out much more clearly in the first workshop that will happen towards the beginning of the year in 2017. The other thing I think is important is that you do have a chance to ask questions, and Sophie has spoken to you about that. So we'll run through up to the part where we go through the QuickSmart lesson components. I'll then break and see if anybody has any questions at that stage. So why do we need the QuickSmart Numeracy program? The Industry Skills Council in 2011 commissioned or reported on a report called No More Excuses. And some of the results of that I think were quite floundering for many of us in the educational setting. And it showed in this report that around half of working age Australians have literacy, language and numeracy problems. So the situation looks to be getting worse rather than getting better, and so we really need to do something at the school end to try and alleviate these problems. When you look at the statistics that you can now see on your screen, it shows you that some 53% of working age Australians have difficulty with numeracy skills. That means currently nearly 8 million Australian adults are likely to experience difficulty with their numeracy skills. This doesn't mean that people can't use numeracy skills in their lives. What it does mean is that the numeracy tasks that are required in work or personal environment are sometimes beyond the skill level of some of this 53%. People experience difficulties or make mistakes, calculating correct change, recording accurate measurements, checking calculations against estimates and things like that. So they just can't complete all of those skills. You can also see that 46% of Australian adults, and that's some 7 million Australian adults, have similar difficulties with literacy. This means that reading tasks required in their work or their personal environments are sometimes beyond their skills. So they make mistakes reading and following instructions, they have trouble communicating reliably via email, or they have trouble interpreting graphs and charts. So this is certainly not a situation that I expected in a country such as Australia, and it's something, as I said, we really need to address at our school level. Deschler, who's one of the best known and well-respected researchers in the field of special education from the University of Kansas, his quote is there on the screen now for you to have a look at. And what Deschler is trying to say, I think, in this quote is something I firmly believe in. And it's that it's important to address children's needs early. However, sometimes some of our children's needs don't become apparent until a little bit further along in their educational journey. And this is one of the things I think that's very important in terms of QuickSmart, that sometimes these children will start to experience difficulty a little later than some of the children who were diagnosed with early diagnosis. Okay. Let's have a look at the NAPLAN bands in Australia, and most of you I think will be very familiar with these. And you can see there they're presented for you in terms of Year 3, Year 5, Year 7 and in Year 9. Now if you have a look at the Year 3 NAPLAN bands, you can see that for a child to achieve above the national minimum standard, they need to achieve a band 3 in Year 3, and hopefully you can see my cursor there showing that on your screen. When a child then comes to Year 5, they have to achieve at a band 5 or above to be above the national minimum standard. And one of the things that's becoming apparent in our research is that many of our students don't have sufficient growth to move from a band 3 to a band 5 in Year 5. So a band 3 in Year 5, 3 through to a band 5 in Year 5. You can then see for Year 7, the above national minimum standard has gone up to a band 6. And again, the case is that some students fall off, if you like, and cannot achieve the growth necessary to move from a band 5 in Year 5 to a band 6 in Year 7. Let's have a look at this information a little bit differently and have a look at some NAPLAN results. I do apologise that the NAPLAN data only goes up to 2015. I actually went onto the ICARA site today and it's still only in the preliminary form on the site and hasn't been broken down yet into this metropolitan, provincial, remote, etc. If we look down any column, and let's just pick the metropolitan column here, you can see that we've been undertaking NAPLAN since 2008, and here we are now, or here we were in 2015, and we couldn't say that there'd been too much improvement in the percentage of the students achieving above the national minimum standard. So we've spent a lot of money and done a lot of testing, but there hasn't been much significant growth in the percentages above the national minimum standard. If you look at this data another way and look on any column, and let's just pick 2010, or we can pick 2015, that might be better, and see what happens as we move from metropolitan to provincial to remote to very remote. And you can see there that there's a significant drop-off in the percentage of students achieving above the national minimum standard as we move from metropolitan to provincial to remote to very remote settings. The disturbing fact for somebody like me is that where I live in country New South Wales in Armidale, we are actually considered to be a remote setting. So where I live, only 68.6% of our students are achieving above the national minimum standard in Year 3. Try and hold those figures in your head for a moment and we'll go across to Year 5. If you have a look at the same time in Year 5, we can just flip back to Year 3 in case you didn't catch it. In Year 5, Year 3, 85.2% of students in metropolitan are above the national minimum standard. Go to Year 5 and that's dropped off to 84.6, and our approximate 40% in the very remote for Year 3 has now dropped back to 33%. If we just quickly go through these slides, you can see that in Year 7, there's more drop-off for students achieving above the national minimum standard. It seems to stabilise a little bit for Year 9, and we can see there's just a slight dropping off of those particular students. If we want to follow one particular cohort through, and if we pick students, example from Year 3 in 2008, having a look at those figures there across this top line, we can see how many students are in those above the national minimum standard. Now, if we think about it, these same students will be in Year 5 in 2010. So if we go across to the Year 5 data and look at the 2010, we can see that the 86.2 has dropped off here to an 83.1, which shows you what I mentioned before. Many of the students can't show the needed growth to maintain being above the national minimum standard. The students from Year 5 in 2010 will be in Year 7 in 2012. So Year 7 2010, 83.1, Go across to Year 7 in 2012, and that's dropped back to 79.9. I think now I've shown you enough of the area I think that causes me most concern with our education. Now, so we need to do something for those students, and they're not the students that had difficulties at the beginning. These are students where their difficulties have occurred along the way. And Hargraves would say to us that these students who are sitting in front of us, especially those who are most at risk, really need us to do something for them. So we need something right now for these students because tomorrow is too late for them. And I think if you think about it, what's needed is something to help these children now and something that keeps them going into the future. QuickSmart can be the thing that can help these students for what they need now. We'll go through now then briefly the general aims of the QuickSmart program. Okay, so the first one, I think, and perhaps the most important one, is to offer some of these students a last chance or a second chance or a last chance to become active, confident learners. If we don't do something for these students, then we're at risk of losing them from our education system. So it's really important that we do something for them now. The other thing that's important, and QuickSmart differs from some other programs that are out there, in that we work on the students' speed, accuracy and understanding of their basic mathematics facts. And you can see there on the slide it mentioned literacy as well, but today we're just going to focus on numeracy. So speed, accuracy and understanding are all equally important in the world of QuickSmart in terms of basic facts. The other thing we're going to do, if these children have got a good foundation in their basic facts, they will become active participants in the classroom. And our qualitative data that we receive back from our schools strongly supports that these students become much more active participants in the classroom. No longer are they trying to fly just under the radar. They're now happy to be involved in the educational setting. The other thing I think that's also really important for these students is not only their performance in the school classroom, but let's also think about some of their education beyond their school age. So think about the sorts of things they're going to need to do in the future, the TAFE courses they might need to do, the life skill courses they need to do in terms of life-saving, those sorts of things. They need to have this confidence to be able to go on and achieve and become actively engaged in these courses as well. The other thing that QuickSmart does, it's not going to turn a struggling mathematician into a brilliant mathematician overnight, but it provides the children with a sound foundation for further classroom instruction. So it gives them the opportunity to engage in what their classroom teacher is working with them on. The other thing, and at first glance it looks to be a little bit of a shallow aim, but it's not when you go deeper into it, is that many of your schools want all of our students to achieve at statewide or standardised test above that national minimum standard. Now, when you look into that aim, it's hoping then that each individual student will be able to achieve that of being above the national minimum standard. They're the things we work towards in the QuickSmart program. Another important thing to remember is that QuickSmart is a fourth phase intervention. Phase 1 intervention is where the teacher teaches in the classroom. Phase 2 is where the teacher provides differentiated activities to the students in the classroom. Phase 3 then is when the teacher is supported in the class by another teacher's aide or another teacher coming into their class to work with small groups of students within the classroom. And Phase 4 is where students are moved from the large class into a smaller class setting where the instruction can be more closely done to meet the needs of these individual students. Now, a QuickSmart instructor works with a pair of students for 3 half-hour sessions a week, so 3 1.5-hour sessions a week. So each student will get 1.5 hours of QuickSmart per week, but it is important to know that it is small class instruction and instructors work only with a pair of students. Each QuickSmart lesson follows a clear lesson structure. There are 6 components. in the lesson, and each of those components runs for 5 minutes. It's really important that this instruction is short, sharp, and to the point instruction. We need to keep the students moving and engaged all the time they're in a QuickSmart lesson. Just to quickly run them through you, and again, this will be explained in much more detail in your first workshop, is the first part is where we do the explicit teaching in a QuickSmart lesson, and we refer to that as focus facts. So this is where we may go over some misconceptions or some mistakes a child has made in the previous QuickSmart lesson. The second component then is flashcards, and the instructor flashes flashcards at a student for 1 minute to see how many cards they can achieve in a minute. The target for QuickSmart is 30 flashcards correct in 1 minute. So remembering that speed and understanding are important, and so is the accuracy. So 30 flashcards, 100% correct in a minute is the goal for that flashcard component. We then move on to a little bit more complex part of the lesson, and this is a pencil paper time where the students work on number facts based on addition and subtraction, initially on the number that they are currently working on. There are 80 facts on a sheet. The student sees how many of those they can complete in 2 minutes. The fourth and fifth components of a QuickSmart lesson are run simultaneously. One student will do one component for 5 minutes, they then switch to the other. So let's talk about the assessment component first, which we call the AusCAS. The AusCAS then broadens out what the student has been doing, and it looks at all of the number facts on a particular operation. If we are working, for example, on a flashcard for +3, to just go back through the other lesson components again, their focus facts will be on addition and subtraction of 3, their flashcards will be on addition of 3, the speed sheet challenge will be on addition and subtraction and 3. The AusCAS assessment then, they'll either be working on a basic addition AusCAS or an addition AusCAS. The addition AusCAS includes all number facts from 0 plus 0 up to and including 12 plus 12. 20 of those are randomly chosen for each assessment. Again, that takes the instructor approximately 5 minutes to do that with one student. While they're working with that one student, the other student is working on an independent worksheet that's related to the number fact that they are currently working on or number facts that they have completed their work on. When the AusCAS assessment for one student is complete, the students switch over and the instructor works on the AusCAS with the other student. To complete the lesson then, we go to the games component. There are many games that are provided with your QuickSmart kits when you get them, so games like 3 in a row, double zero and same sums. We also go through some other games in our first workshop. The purpose of these games is one, the students will actually do a lot of maths learning about number, and when we examine those games, some of the number facts that are given are quite difficult. So they're working on those in a fun setting, and in many occasions don't even realise that they're doing mathematics. And the other reason for having a game at the end of the lesson is so that the students go back to their normal classroom feeling relaxed and comfortable and ready to re-engage with their classroom work.
Are there different levels within the program?
There are different number facts within the program. So the aim of the program, Sophie, is to get everybody to have automaticity. And automaticity is the capacity to recall a known fact without seemingly having to think about it. So we work with the students on addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. And each of those sets of facts goes from 0 up to 12. And of course, many of you out there will realise for division, we can't divide by 0, so division goes from 1 to 12. We do a pre-assessment with the students to find on that pre-assessment, which we'll look at a little bit later in the presentation. We do a pre-assessment for addition, subtraction, multiplication and division, and find which of those operations the students need to work on and at which level they need to start with. So which number fact do they need to start with? They may already have automaticity on the easy addition facts. Easy addition facts are something like 0, 1, 2, 5 and 10, but they may have more difficult difficulty with addition of 4 and addition of 6. So from that pre-test, we determine which operation and which number fact they start on, and then we start our QuickSmart work from there.
Also, another question, if you have 2 students in your session, a pair of students, both of the students have to be on the same function, like you mentioned +3 before, or can they be on different things?
Okay, good question, Sophie. They can be on different functions. However, when an instructor is just beginning in QuickSmart, they've got a lot to think about. If you think about the lesson, there's the 6 lesson components and the different things we do with each lesson component. So we suggest to schools, for simplicity at the beginning, try and pair your students who will be at the same level. So if you can start your pair of students both on, for example, addition of 3, it makes it much easier for the instructor because they're just having to think about addition of 3 number facts. Over time then, it's fairly obvious that one may progress more quickly than the other. As the instructor becomes more accomplished and more practiced in their art of running a QuickSmart lesson, it causes no difficulty at all for the instructor to have one student working on example for addition of 7 and the other student still be working on addition of 5. You may also get to the stage where one student will progress on to the next operation. They'll progress from addition on to subtraction. So you may have one on subtraction and the other on addition. And an instructor who's been working with QuickSmart for a little period of time won't have too much difficulty coping with that either. It just becomes natural for you to think about what each individual student is up to and what sorts of things you need to be discussing with them during their parts of the lesson. I want to move on now then to think more about, we've talked about QuickSmart in general, but we want to think about QuickSmart in your own particular setting. And you need to know, what does QuickSmart provide and what do you need to provide? So when you join the QuickSmart program, you'll receive a comprehensive kit. And your comprehensive kit contains most of the resources you are going to need for your QuickSmart lesson. It provides all the flashcards. You get a games pack which provides all the games. You get dice, you get timers, you get all those sorts of nitty-gritty things that you need to run your lesson. So all those materials are there for you, and that's really important. The things that you need to provide are things like the focus fact sheet. You'll receive master sets of all of those, and you will need to print off your own copies of focus fact sheets and your own copies of speed sheets. And also things like your graphing sheets. So you graph the students' results from their flashcards. You'll need to photocopy off those for yourself. So we give you the lesson structure. We give you the essential resources for running your lesson. The other thing that's really important before you get too far into your QuickSmart at your school is that you'll be invited to come along to Workshop 1. There are 3 workshops throughout the year for QuickSmart. Workshop 1 is right at the beginning of the school year, or as early as we can organise it in the school year. And during those 2 days, you learn the theories behind the QuickSmart program. So we talk about things like deliberate practice, forming neural pathways, the importance of working memory. Those sorts of things are discussed in detail. We help you understand why what you do in your QuickSmart lesson is going to work for the students that you're working with. And we also, if you like, go through the manual things of what we actually do in a QuickSmart lesson. So those beginning workshops are really important for people. The other professional development opportunities we provide are Workshop 2, which usually happens during the middle of the year. And when we come back to Workshop 2, each school is asked to do a short presentation on the implementation of the QuickSmart program in their school, any highlights and any challenges that they've had. We check that everybody's working from the same page because we need to remember this is a research project, and as researchers you need to make sure that you're implementing the QuickSmart program in the way that it's intended. And then we build on the ideas we've developed and we introduce problem solving. So that's all done in the 2 days for Workshop 2 in the middle of the year. We then come back together towards the end of the year for a workshop 3 for another 2 days. And again, consolidate on things we've already learned, and we take you through then another, if you like, development of your own particular skills as a QuickSmart instructor. The other thing I think that's really important, and I'm not going to read this slide, you can read it for yourself, is that there's an extensive website. If you have a look at the website, you also get a code to come into the private area of the website. And there are many resources on there which we will go through during Workshop 1, which will support you in the implementation of the QuickSmart program. We also have a telephone support service that's currently provided by Andrew. And Andrew does a particularly wonderful job of supporting QuickSmart instructors right across Australia who are having difficulties not only with technology, he helps them with all sorts of things. And so that's available to you as well. The other thing that I'm available to you at any time, not if I'm running a QuickSmart workshop, but I'm also there to support you in your QuickSmart journey. So they're the sorts of things which I try to provide to you to help you be as successful as you possibly can be. There are some things, though, that you need to do within the school setting itself. And if you let us know before the end of the school year that you are committing to becoming a QuickSmart school, Sophie will send out to you more detail on some of these things that are now appearing on the screen so that you can start your preparation for QuickSmart for next year. So I mentioned there was some duplicating of resources that needed to be done. Each student needs a folder for QuickSmart, and those folders need to be purchased and organised. That's not a big job. They basically start off empty and the student fills them up as the year goes on. We need to do some pre and post testing for the students. We need to pre-test them so that we can get a benchmark of where these students are beginning from so that you can measure how much growth they've made from their involvement in the QuickSmart program. I mentioned before about the AusCAS. The AusCAS is a computer-based component of QuickSmart. So that only runs on PCs. So for schools that are Mac-based, you're going to need to have one PC for each instructor that you want to be working at the same time. So if you envisage setting up a QuickSmart room at your school, you envisage having 2 QuickSmart instructors working in that room, each working with a pair of students, you will need 2 PCs in your room. So that's something to think about. We supply you with the software. As soon as you become a QuickSmart school, we'll give you a code so that you can download the software that you need for that. For those instructors who are feeling a little bit nervous out there, don't feel nervous. We allow you to download the software to your own computer so that you can practice with that before you actually start your QuickSmart lessons. Your QuickSmart room needs to be in a quiet area of the school. As that component is microphone based, it's important that it is in a relatively quiet area, and you also need somewhere then to store your QuickSmart resources. You'll have a kit, you'll have student folders, you'll have copies of resources that are going to be used in lessons, so you need somewhere to store that. So QuickSmart does really need its own dedicated space, or it is possible for it to share a space with other learning support activities that have students withdrawn from the classroom as well. Okay, to be successful in your school, each school needs to have some people within the school who are performing particular roles. And one of the most important roles is the school coordinator. The school coordinator tends to be someone who is teacher trained, and they may be a classroom teacher who's just given a little bit of time or given some time to coordinate the QuickSmart program. So their roles are or some of the things that they might do are to attend the professional development workshops with the instructors, to support the instructors, and also so that they have an understanding of how and why the QuickSmart program works. The QuickSmart coordinator also identifies the target, so the QuickSmarters or the QuickSmart students, and also the comparison students. We'll talk again more about that at Workshop 1, and if you're from a New South Wales Department of Education school, you are not allowed to have comparison students, and again we will mention that more at Workshop 1. The coordinator administers or organises the pre and post testing of the QuickSmart and the comparison students. So where did the students start at the beginning? And we do some assessments for that. Where have they grown to by the end of the program so that you can measure their growth? They also organise the student and instructor timetables so that the students and the instructors know their routine for their lessons. The other thing is the coordinator can help in the organising of the QuickSmart space, the resources in the computer and the folders. In most schools that's done mostly by the instructors, but the QuickSmart coordinator can be involved in that process as well. The other thing that's really important, and Sophie brought this up in her question before, is looking at your pre-test data to identify the starting points for the students. And that may be something that QuickSmart instructors need some guidance and support of from coordinators. In many schools, it's not just done by the coordinator. You may have a learning support team functioning in your school. They might like to be involved in the selection process and the identifying where students start as well. So this QuickSmart team can be as small as your coordinator and your instructors, or you can build it out a little bit more and include some of the other learning support people within your school. Many schools also do a mid-program progress report, just so the instructors can feel that they're doing some good with these students, and so that you can also show other staff members the growth that these students have had since they've been involved with the program. So that role of that coordinator is a very important role, and it means time being devoted to it. So it's going to have to be, if you're thinking about loads for coordinators for next year, it's important to build in that time so that they can spend that time with their QuickSmart instructors supporting them. The other thing that's really important for school, and I can't stress this too much, I don't think, is that schools where a coordinator works with one pair of students, so they give up 1.5 hours of time a week, or their timetable for 1.5 hours of time a week to work with a pair of students, they report stronger school results. And if you think about it, it makes sense. If a coordinator's been hands-on in the QuickSmart program, they understand the joys and the frustrations that both the QuickSmarters and their QuickSmart instructors are going through as they progress through the QuickSmart program. In terms of instructors, what's important for instructors to do? Well, obviously you're going to be doing the instructing. So you're the ones who are going to be working with the pairs of QuickSmart students during the approximately 30 weeks that the program will run in the course of a year in your school. The other thing that's important for you is to attend the professional development workshops. Your work in QuickSmart will be much more meaningful and much more beneficial to your students if you understand why what you're doing works and why it's important to be true to the structure of the QuickSmart program. You learn about it, you learn to understand the philosophy of QuickSmart, and you understand the theory behind the program as well. You'll provide quality tuition to the students, and I think one of the things that many people are quite surprised about, you will form quite strong educational relationships with those students. QuickSmart has gone back to schools several years after students have finished the QuickSmart program and interviewed students. It was amazing how many times that student couldn't tell you the name of their classroom teacher, but they could tell you exactly who their QuickSmart instructor was when they did QuickSmart. The other thing that's really important as well, that you have a commitment to supporting these low achieving students. That's fundamental to your success as a QuickSmart instructor. You have to believe that you can make a difference with these students. You have to establish a supportive learning environment focused on student success and student improvement. And that doesn't mean you're soft. In many times that means that you have to be quite firm with these students. People often laugh at me, but to me the analogy is quite a good analogy. A good QuickSmart instructor is like a good quality pavlova. They can be a bit crusty on the outside, but they're nice and soft in the middle. And if you think about it, that's what will make a good QuickSmart instructor. You also obviously have to have a security clearance to work with the students, and I think you have to be prepared to accept the challenge of being a QuickSmart instructor and realise that you're going to learn a lot yourself. Please don't be put off at this stage if you think my basic number skills are not good at this stage. One of the things many QuickSmart instructors report as the year goes on that their basic number skills certainly improve as well. And if you think about it, you haven't had to use your basic number skills probably in this way for a long time. So you pick them up again very quickly. And I've never had anybody who said, I can't be a QuickSmart instructor. So we'll make it happen for you, or it will work. The other thing that's important, I think, is to have a QuickSmart timetable. And in your timetable, you need to think about how important QuickSmart is going to be to you and the students at your school. So if you think about your classroom teachers, and I came from a world of being a classroom teacher, there was nowhere I thought was more important for students to be than in my classroom and learning from me. So some of your teachers may be reluctant at the beginning to give up a half an hour of their lesson time for the students to go off on QuickSmart. So we need to have a designated timetable. We need to share the love in when the students are going to come out for QuickSmart. So we try and spread it across their school day so that they don't miss the same lessons all the time. We also then need to be careful that we share the information with all stakeholders so that all stakeholders understand why we're doing the QuickSmart program, which students we're working on with the QuickSmart program, and what we're actually doing with these students. And if all stakeholders understand this, they're much happier for students to be involved in the QuickSmart program. Once you've got a timetable designated, it needs to be quarantined to a certain extent. Otherwise, you get to the end of the year expecting to have done 90 QuickSmart lessons and finding that your students have only been given 65 QuickSmart lessons. So it is important that these lessons are, once they're designated for QuickSmart, that 99% of the time those lessons can take place. Okay, thinking about the QuickSmart students, you're going to need to think about, as the rest of the year goes on, which students are most likely to benefit from being on the QuickSmart program. Well, it goes without saying that they're going to need to be students who have persistent difficulties in numeracy, so that's the starting point. Students that have a good attitude to learning in small groups. Students that attend school regularly is really important, because if you're a QuickSmart instructor, you don't continually want one chair to be empty in your QuickSmart room. You start to think about, I could have another student sitting in that chair taking advantage of the QuickSmart program. So to me, regular school attendance is really important. You're investing a lot of money in this student. They need to be there to take advantage of it. In your first year particularly, I want you to choose students that have average academic potential without major attention difficulties or problem behaviours. As QuickSmart instructors are starting to learn their craft, they want students that are going to be relatively easy to work with, not students who are going to have big attention problems or big behaviour problems as well. Okay, so what sort of students are we looking at? The QuickSmart program was designed for students in years 5 to 8. Many schools now work with students in year 4. If you're going to work with students in year 4, we'll discuss that a little bit more at workshop 1. We talked about before that speed was important. We have to remember that response time is also developmental. So some of your students in year 4 may not be as quick in their response as some of your students in year 5, 6, 7, etc. would be. So we'll discuss that a little bit later. We want students who are at risk on the basis of their previous work, or talk to classroom teachers. Some schools spend a lot of time collecting data on this test and data on this test and data on this test. Please don't forget those professional people in your school called the classroom teacher, who can tell you a lot about the students that they've had in their class all of this year. You might be looking for students with low basic skills data or low NAPLAN data, and many schools use NAPLAN, if you like, as their basis for the beginning of the selection process for their students. We ask each school to have a minimum of 12 students on the QuickSmart program. Many schools have more students than that. I worked with a school in southern Sydney just a few years ago, and every time I went back to a workshop with them, they'd say, guess how many students we've got now? I think they got to the stage where they actually had 112 students on their QuickSmart program by the time they got to workshop 3. That's not achievable for most schools. A number of 12 is achievable for most schools. You might like to have 24, you might like to have 18. 12 students gives you a certain amount of stability with your student data, and that's important when you come to look at your student results at the end of the year. We mentioned before about students working in pairs. They need to be strategically paired. So in the beginning, as I said, you want students who will start off in approximately the same place on QuickSmart. That makes it much easier for your instructor. You also need to think about students who will work well together and students who won't work well together, and don't put those together. If you have problems with pairs, if your problems arise during the time, you can swap those pairings around. Okay, we've been talking about data, and we've talked about some data collection. You're going to collect data for us during the year. You only do it in two stages. You do it as a pre-test and you do it as a post-test. And that data is collected for your QuickSmart students, a minimum of 12, and your 6 comparison students if you're not a New South Wales Department of Education school. At the end of the school year, you'll receive a report back on the performance of those particular students. So the pre-test we've already mentioned, there's 2 parts to the pre-test. One is we get the students usually to do a Pat Maths test. Some of the schools in Victoria also use the on-demand test. The other part of the pre-test is the AusCAS assessment. Now the AusCAS is used in 2 ways in QuickSmart. One for the pre and post testing, and then it's also used as part of a lesson component. In the pre-testing, we'll get you to do at least 5 tests, 5 AusCAS tests for each student. 1 on number naming, which gives us the students' response time on something they've already got automaticity on, so that's very important baseline data. And then 1 for each of the operations of addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. We also ask you to collect attendance data during the course of the QuickSmart program. The post-testing then, when you think about it, the post-testing is a repeat of the pre-testing at the beginning. So the students sit for the Pat Maths exam again, and they repeat exactly the same level of AusCAS testing again at the end of the time. Now, you get a report back at the end of the year, which will be similar to what I've got here on my screen now. This is national data from 2014. Our 2015 data is not available yet. Some of our schools in QuickSmart work from beginning of term 2 through to end of term 1 of a year, or from NAPLAN to NAPLAN. And some of those schools are now just submitting their data, and we're actually working on the presentation of our report for 2015 as we speak. If we have a look at division, and we'll just have a look at one of these because I can see I've been talking for a long period of time. You can see for our students here across Australia in 2014, there were 3,881 students who did the AusCAS test for division. You can see at the beginning it took those students on average 5.6 seconds to answer each question. At the end, it was down to 3.6 seconds. There was a gain of almost 2 seconds during the course of the year, and that produces an effect size of 0.7. Effect sizes are based on the work of Professor John Hattie from the University of Melbourne, and he says that an average student in an average classroom will show growth that has an effect size of approximately 0.3. So these students in QuickSmart on Division have achieved over 2 years growth in 1 year. If you have a look at the comparison students, so these are average achieving students in the same classes as the QuickSmart students, you can see there's less of those because we require you only to have 6 of them. You can see their average response time at the beginning was quicker than the QuickSmart students. By the end of the year, though, the QuickSmart students, were responding more quickly than the comparison students. So they had responding more quickly, and you can see there the corresponding effect size for the students. We'll have a quick look now at the accuracy. So for the QuickSmart students, approximately 64% at the end had grown to 85%. For the comparison students, they'd started at 76% or 77% and had grown to almost 83%. So you can see that the QuickSmart students again outperformed their average achieving peers. Having a look at the graphs below, you can see here this is response time. So the blue are the QuickSmart students. Here's their response time here at the beginning. Here's the comparison students, so they were quicker in responding than the QuickSmart students. And at the end, you can see QuickSmart students were responding more quickly than the comparison students. And in terms of the accuracy, here are the QuickSmart students down here, your comparison students up here, and again at the end, the QuickSmart students outperformed the comparison students. Data is available for each operation, so all this information is in the National Report documents, and they can be found on the public QuickSmart website. So if you go to that, you can see this in further detail. We won't talk about it in great detail, but if you can see for multiplication, here's the gap between the students at the beginning, and again, the QuickSmart students have outperformed in terms of speed and accuracy, the comparison students. Again, for subtraction, you can see the gap here at the beginning and the narrowing of the gap in each case, and again here, slight outperforming by the QuickSmart students, and also for addition, the clear narrowing of the gap. You can see for the operation of division, the initial gap wasn't as big as it was for, if you like, the more complex operations later on. So that, as I said, that data is all available on the website if you would like to look at that. In terms of the PAT Maths, many of you will be very interested in the PAT Maths because it's more closely related, if you like, to the NAPLAN data. You can see for the QuickSmart students, their mean was 41 at the beginning. It's grown to nearly 49. That's a gain of 7. And ACER say that the average student should show 5 percentage point growth during the course of a year. So these students have grown more than what they would be expected to grow. The comparison students have grown from 51 up to nearly 57, with their just over 5 percentage points growth, which is expected by ACER. And again, right here on the right-hand side, you can see the effect sizes. You can see again the QuickSmart students have over 2 years growth there, and the comparison students have a very healthy 1+ years growth as well. In terms of the PAT Maths, and June from QuickSmart always presents this for us graphically. In terms of stay-on growth, you can see here for the QuickSmart students at the beginning of the year, the clustering of them down in these lower stay-ons for the PAT Maths. When we have a look though at their post-test results, you can see there's a more significant clustering of the QuickSmart students up here in these stay-ons 3, 4 and 5, where we would like them to be. There's even a smattering up here in the 7s, 8s and 9s, 9 stay-ons. So there's been a significant shift of the growth of the students towards the right in those stay-ons. And there's the little model that June likes to show us, showing the growth of those students and showing the movement in the curve. In terms of cost structure, your cost for Year 1 for QuickSmart will be approximately $10,500. The thing to include, remember in that, is that the professional development workshops are included in that. We recommend that all instructors come to that and that the coordinators come to that. School executive are certainly welcome to that as well. And in fact, that money will allow you to bring up to 5 staff. And I've never been known to say no to a school who say, we want to bring 7. If our venue will let you have more than 5, if we can physically fit them in, we're happy for you to bring those people along. So that's all included in the money. The software license goes for 3 years. So along with the software license, you get that support that I mentioned before, IT support and support from someone like myself for 3 years. The resource kit is yours to keep, so you have those resources in your school for as long as they survive, and they last a jolly long time. Let me know. So that's the cost, and if you want more information about costs, then I suggest that you contact Sophie and have a discussion with her. Now, we also understand that schools with less than 100 students don't have the same funding pool as larger schools. Because of that, then, we reduce the cost for smaller schools, and your cost comes down to $7,000. Usually in smaller schools as well, they don't have quite a large team that need to come along to the professional development training. But again, you're welcome to bring as many staff as we can fit in on that particular workshop. So that's why the cost differential between the larger schools and the smaller schools. I think we've already talked about everything that's involved in the cost. Just before I ask for any more questions, I just want to leave you on a positive note. And from my experience from working with QuickSmart schools, and I've been in my current position now for nearly 5 years and was lucky enough to be the joint coordinator of a QuickSmart program within my own school before I joined the QuickSmart team. These are the 5 things that I've picked out that I think help make a school be more successful. The first one is to have an enthusiastic and passionate coordinator, and that's really important. So not someone who's just given a role to play, but someone who really puts themselves in that role and starts to love QuickSmart as much as people like me do. We want instructors who are confident, who are passionate about their work and believe they can make a difference. And you need to think carefully about the people you are going to have as your instructors. And if I can be a little bit flippant, I haven't been so far, but if I can be a little bit flippant now, the maths teacher who has no classroom discipline and the children spend their life swinging off the classroom fans instead of engaging in their mathematics activity may not be the best person to choose to be your QuickSmart instructor. You have to think about the role these people are going to play within the school and the sort of professional relationships they're going to need to develop with their QuickSmart students. The other thing that I've noticed that's really important is where the coordinator and the QuickSmart team find regular time to get together. Initially, the instructors are going to need quite a bit of support just to be reassured, yes, you are doing things appropriately. Also, discussion about this is where such and such a child is up to. I'm a little bit worried they haven't moved on. Can anybody give me some suggestions about those? I'm not talking about lengthy meetings with a strict agenda. I'm talking about people sitting down and talking about their QuickSmart work in a professional manner. Once a fortnight, once a month if you can't do it once a fortnight. Half an hour once a fortnight gives you plenty of time to talk about the sorts of things you need to do. Also, QuickSmart needs to be seen as a whole school program, not something that belongs to the QuickSmart coordinator or to the maths faculty or to the numeracy leader or whatever it happens to be. It's owned by the whole school and it's a whole school program, and most schools say that they get significant results from students in the classroom, not just for mathematics, but for all the other KLAs. So it's important, if you're thinking about getting that whole school approach, you need to think about getting buy-in from all of the stakeholders. Your stakeholders are going to be much more effective if they understand what the QuickSmart program is, why their child or their students are involved in the QuickSmart program, and what they can do to support the child who is in the QuickSmart program. So bringing those stakeholders together and sharing knowledge and understanding about the QuickSmart program are things that can really make a difference. So they're my top 5 in things that make a really successful QuickSmart school. Really conscious of the time. If you want to register for the QuickSmart program, there's an email address there now that you can all see. You can ring Sophie, who introduced the webinar. Her phone number there, 02 6773 2983, or you can get an online form from the SIMA website.